Hello and welcome. I'm Jana Greenouch and I'm excited to be part of ICAP-Gen's records analysis series called What Did That Really Say? And the topic of this video is English civil registration records. Civil registration records are some of the most important records that we have for researching our English families during the last couple hundred years. Let's begin with a quick history lesson. England began an official government registration of births, marriages, and deaths in the summer of 1837. Starting that July 1st, whenever someone was born, married, or died, the details were supposed to be recorded by local registrars. And every 3 months, these local recorders were required to send a copy of all the events they registered in that quarter to one general registrar in London. And these quarters of the year are important to understand because this is how the records are organized. For example, if a birth was registered between January and March, it will be filed in the first quarter or the March quarter. Sometimes we refer to them as the March quarter, the June quarter, the September quarter, or the December quarter. Quick note, it is possible that an event could be registered in the quarter after it actually happened. For example, if a baby was born at the end of December, the birth may not be recorded until the March quarter of the following year. Now, here I have to break your heart a little bit and tell you that the actual certificates, birth, marriage, or death, are not online. In fact, you have to order them from the General Register Office on their website, which you can see here, and pay for them if you want them. The good news is, in the past few years, certificates have been made available in a PDF format, sendable to your email, so you don't have to wait by the mailbox for weeks. And as of the making of this video, a PDF certificate costs £7 as opposed to the £11, which you can still pay if you want to order the printed, mailed official version. To order a certificate, you'll first need to locate it in an index. And you have several indexes to choose from. I've put them here on the slide for you. A popular choice is FreeBMD. But all of these websites have them. My personal favorite is the one at the bottom. I like to use the GRO index because it includes a little more detail than some of the others. A mother's maiden name in the birth index, for example, the ages of the deceased in the death indexes, and I like that one-stop approach, the index on the same site that I'll be ordering the actual certificates from. Especially because the GRO could theoretically be updating its own index if they were to find errors or things like that. All of these indexes will include the name of the person on the certificate, the district where it was registered, the quarter and year, and then a volume and page number. And you'll need all of this information in order to order the certificate. And let me offer this quick tip. When you're searching these indexes, if you're not finding what you're looking for, don't forget to use variant spellings for the names that you're searching for, maybe even nicknames or middle names. Very often in the indexes, names are mistranscribed or misspelled or a little different than what you might be expecting. This slide shows some results from one of my searches in the GRO birth index. Now, because certificates cost money, you have to be careful what you order. You want to be quite sure that you're looking at the right entry in an index before paying your pounds to order that certificate. Common names in heavily populated areas will be a little bit harder to feel sure about, but this is where the index on the GRO website can be handy. Using the mother's maiden name on a birth index or a person's exact age at death on the death index, these can help you to feel more confident that you're ordering the correct certificate if you happen to know that information. And by the way, I demonstrate this process in a little greater detail in my RootsTech video called Is Everyone Here? strategies for finding complete English families. So check that out if you want to dig in a little deeper and learn how useful these indexes can be. Also, to know that you're looking at the right index entry, you've got to understand how districts work. They're not necessarily the same name as the parish or the town. In fact, districts were created from poor law unions that sometimes covered several parishes. There is a wonderful website created by the people at Family Search that makes it easy to learn the civil registration district for your ancestor's parish, or to take a look at which districts might be close by. You simply enter the parish in their tool and then look at the details for that place. That will look something like this. It's really a wonderful tool for visualizing the various jurisdictional boundaries that apply to your research area. And as you can see, the arrow is pointing to the civil registration district that covers the parish that I typed into the search field. Now, with our remaining time, let's really dig in and take a look at what civil registration records contain. A birth certificate will include the date of birth and the place of birth. It will include the name of the child and their gender, the name of their father and their mother, and usually that mother includes a maiden name. Very valuable information. You get the occupation of the father, and then you get the name and usually occupation and location of the person who came to offer this information, the informant of the information. And one thing to be aware of is the fact that from 1837 through the middle of the 1900s, somewhere around 5% of births in England were termed illegitimate. The parents were not married. And in those cases, you're not likely to see the father's information on the birth certificate. Just something to be aware of. Now, here you have an example of a marriage record, and we're going to spend a little time dissecting this. So, for a marriage record, you're going to find out where and when the marriage occurred. You're going to get the names of the bride and the groom and their ages. And oftentimes with the age column, you don't get an actual age, you get the term of full age or full age. And this is defined as 21 years or older. Anyone younger than that is termed a minor. It's also possible, and I've seen several certificates like this, that the age is actually written as the number 21. And perhaps your ancestor was, in fact, 21 exactly, or it may just be indicating that they were at least 21, meaning old enough to not worry about extra permissions from the parents, etc. This is why we've titled this video series, What Did That Say? Because interpreting records is not always straightforward, is it? We also learn in marriage certificates the condition of the bride and groom. That's the big middle column there. And that's just another way of saying, have they ever been married before? So bachelor and spinster are the most common terms. As you see here, these two have never previously been married. If they had, you would see either widow or widower. We learn their occupations, their places of residence, their father's names, and their father's occupations. Fantastic detail in these records. And here's another tidbit for understanding marriage records. They were supposed to make a note in the father column if the father was deceased, and usually they do, but sometimes they don't. So you wouldn't assume that both of these men are alive at the time of this marriage, although it is very likely that they were. This father column is also extra helpful when the bride was a widow because she's probably listed with her previous married name, but you could usually deduce her maiden name by looking at her father's name. Here's one other thing to keep in mind, the address column that shows their residence. This may just be a village name, as you see in this example, Stony Stratford and Wicken. But often you get an actual address, which is kind of fun. Sometimes they're even the same address, and you're tempted to wonder, why were they living in the same home before they were married? Well, maybe they were, but what's more likely is that to save money and so that they would only have to pay fees for posting marriage bans in one parish, one of the spouses would take up temporary residence in the parish. At least one of them had to be living in the parish for at least 4 weeks before the wedding. So keep that in mind. And one last thing about marriage records I want to mention. Down at the bottom, you see 2 witnesses who signed each certificate. And these were often relatives or close friends of the bride and groom. By the way, here's an important fact. Marriage certificates that you order from the GRO are not the original registers, but they are copies of the records made in the churches where people were married. So before you purchase your ancestor's marriage certificate through civil registration, you may want to check the church records, which could be easier and cheaper to access. The information should be identical, barring any clerical errors. Here's an example of the very same marriage. The top record is the civil registration certificate, and the bottom is the parish's original record of the marriage. And even though the details should be the same, using the original parish records may even give you a glimpse of some of the original handwriting, the signatures of the spouses and the witnesses, unless, of course, they were marked with an X, which was very common, and that usually meant that they couldn't write, couldn't sign their own name. Signatures and handwriting, these can be excellent evidence in our research, so original parish registers are always best. A death certificate will include, of course, the date and the place of the death, the name of the person who died and their gender and their age, their occupation and the cause of their death, and then the person who was the informant. Now, this example I've provided for you demonstrates that when you have a death certificate for a child, in this case a 9-month-old William Alt, of course he didn't have an occupation, and so sometimes in that occupation column you're going to get information about the parents and their occupations. Here it says he was the son of John Alt, who was a boilermaker. And as you're analyzing civil registration certificates, you want to take a close look at the handwriting on the certificate that you receive from the GRO. There are 2 possibilities when you order a certificate. You'll either get a photocopy of the original entry, or you'll get a handwritten copy made by the GRO staff who was filling your order. That would look something like this on the bottom. The handwriting is clearly modern, not from the 1800s. And then you know that you're looking at a copy of a copy, which introduces an even greater possibility of errors. So when we're trying to ascertain the reliability of civil registration records, we want to pay attention to the handwriting. And I need to tell you about one more handy approach to using civil registration records in your English research. The original registrations, the local district copies, are held at local archives. ukbmd.org.uk is an excellent resource for information about these local district copies of civil registrations, the original registration of the birth or death entry, not the copy that was sent to the GRO. And if you can't find what you're looking for in that national GRO index, it's possible that it was left out by accident. And there's a chance that you will find what you're looking for at the local level. And even if it is at the GRO, it might be nice to see the local copy anyway, especially since it came first. They're probably identical, but you never know, maybe not. These can be a little bit harder to locate since there's no national index for these, but this site, UKBMD, is one place that you can search to look for these local records. And they're working to compile a searchable database of names. And you can see on this site which counties or local archives they have participating in this project so far. Okay, now in the early days of civil registration, not everyone complied. It was a new program. So the percentage of compliance, it wasn't super in some parts of England. Death registrations are a little more reliable because they actually required you to have a death certificate in order to have a burial. But in 1875, new legislation brought some stricter requirements. There were fines imposed when someone neglected to report an event. So we can more reliably count on events being registered at that point. However, bear in mind that there were also deadlines for registration, and this may just have inspired some people to lie about the details. For example, parents had 42 days to register a birth, and if they didn't quite make that deadline, well, they might just be inclined to give an incorrect birth date to the registrar in order to avoid a fine. So, like with any historical record, we look at it carefully. We try to understand those possibilities and ask those kinds of questions before assuming that a fact is a fact, even if it is on an official government-created document. Also, always take note of who that informant was on a certificate. Who was it that provided the information for a civil registration entry? That may affect the reliability of the information. Well, our 20-minute session is coming to a close. I have enjoyed sharing with you some of the ins and outs of using England's civil registration records. I hope you found some useful information in this brief presentation, and I wish you the very best in your English research. Feel free to connect with me through any of these social media platforms and enjoy the rest of your RootsTech conference.